everybody. This is Liz Schneider with the Wealthy Empowerment Network, and I'm here with my business partner and bestie, Erin Zilka
Hi,
from
everyone.
also Wealthy Empowerment Network. And we have a guest today who also happens to be my sister. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce Monica Masters, who has quite the career behind her and ahead of her. And her newest venture is as an author and no doubt soon to be best-selling author. So I'd like to introduce Monica Masters. So, hi, Monica. How are you?
Hello, here I
Hi, Monica.
am. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So thank you for having me here. This is very exciting for me. And yeah, I do have a lot going on, that's for sure.
Okay,
So,
so tell us about yourself, a little bit about your background, what you do, what's bringing you here today, and why you do what you do. So tell us your story.
well, my story is I was obviously, well, you know this, I'm the youngest of eight. So, as a youngest child, I just had a very kind of compliant upbringing and didn't have a lot of control over what happened to me. And so as time went on, I got involved with the church, and it really kind of overthrew my life. I had a very specific life direction I wanted to go in. I did originally want to be a musician, and I wanted to stay in college for a long time. I was interested in science. I wanted to do, I just wanted to be a musician and do a lot of performing. And I wanted to also get a degree and maybe some degrees and just learn everything there was to learn. And my life got kind of derailed around when I was 20. I got involved with a guy, and I will be talking a lot about that. And then he got involved in a church, and I, by default, got involved in a very strict religion. And from that point forward, I no longer called the shots in my own life. So the church called the shots, my husband called the shots, and I no longer was in control of what I wanted to do. So I wound up being a worship leader for a very long time. And then I finally, after 23 years of marriage and being involved in the church, I finally, and this was all church leadership all along the way, I finally got brave enough to end this marriage that I never had really wanted. And at that point, I really got thrown out of the church. I literally was fired from the church. And when I was fired, I lost everything and I had to pick up the pieces and start over. So that was just around 13 years ago. And so what I have done is kind of parlayed that into a book about getting your life back, because that's really what I had to do, is get my life back. But on an ordinary everyday basis, I have a business, I perform, I sing, I'm in several bands, and I just published my book on Kindle, and it's soon to be in hard copy, and in the fall will be an audiobook, which, oh my gosh, if you've never done an audiobook, it's crack for people who are expressive, because every story you tell, you're like, I was right there watching him do this and going to do that, and it's just very exciting. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun with it.
So, when did you realize throughout your history that you actually thought you had a book in you with all of these things that happened?
Well, interestingly enough, you may not know this, but mom always thought I would be a writer. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Doesn't surprise me though. She was always very supportive. That's cool.
Yeah, no, but she said, I think you should write. And I think I wrote like two stories when I was a kid, and mom was like, "Oh, you're a genius," and I'm like, I don't, I wasn't okay. She was just being a good mom, and but I always, the thing is, I was such a nerd in school, and so my friends were my books, and I mean, in fact, I remember I just did not connect with the outside world for whatever reason. You know, you saw it. I was nerdy. So I remember, Erin, you'll love this story, but I remember one time we got into a fist fight, which she always won because she was just tougher, way tougher than I was.
I was
I was on Ritalin. My
with a
growth was
bully.
stunted. I was just this little wimp.
I
You
bullied
you were
her.
tough, yeah. And so we got into this fist fight at the bottom of the stairs, and I'll never. And dad came up and he's like, "You're both grounded for a month." And I'm like, ha ha, I don't have any friends anyway. And of course, for Liz, it was devastating.
Oh
She
my
was
god.
involved with everything with her friends. She was a cheerleader. She's like, oh my God, I grounded for a month. I'm like, "Huh." I go upstairs to my
Changed
books.
my
It
life.
didn't make any difference for me. It was like not even a punishment for me. I mean, my parents really should have had a different punishment for me.
That's
So
funny.
if they would have taken away my books, then I would have been suffering. Anyway,
I
so I was an
get that.
unbelievable. I just read those from my friends. I'd read these stories and they were dumb little stories that people probably don't even remember now. It was like the Happy Hollisters, which nobody knows now, but now it would probably be like
I
Harry
do.
Potter or something.
I read them.
You read the Happy
Did.
Hollisters? Oh my gosh, that was
Absolutely
the
did.
best. I read
They were
that
great.
series over and over.
Yep.
Liz, did you even know that was in our library?
Oh, we still have, I think my parents still have those old books and they're like maroon cover, like
Oh,
covers.
yep,
Yeah.
the maroon
Yep.
covers.
I
I read
love
them
them.
over and over again. I read the Laura Ingalls series about a billion times, and I tried to get my kids. My kids are like, Mom, Pioneer Life is so boring. And I
Oh,
mean,
that's
they're
interesting.
not wrong, but for me, it was very exciting. I don't know. They just didn't get into it. Anyway, I'm like, don't you want to make homemade bread? They're like, no, Mom, you can buy this at a store. Okay. Readily available. So anyway, I just always was a very, very avid reader. So and I've always been very particular about the books that I read. So I don't know, and I was the spelling champion in my 5th grade, regional spelling champion right here.
Nice. That's what
It's
makes me
such a
laugh.
like not I couldn't do anything, sports, nothing. All I remember of kickball is being yelled at, "You're running the wrong way. What the hell are you doing?" And the teachers just like didn't care. So whatever. So sports is post traumatic. So yeah, I was just always big into words.
Yeah.
And I don't think now when I was in the church, I did a lot of public speaking. I every Sunday, Wednesday, depending on the church, sometimes it was like 4 or 5 times a week, I would be up front and I would speak. I'd talk about the songs. I'd talk about this is what this word in this song means, and you might not have thought about it that way before. And anything that I could do to make it bring it to life for the people who were there and get them connected. And like, oh, instead of sitting there doing their laundry list in their head, oh, I got to pick up milk or whatever, getting like, okay, God is here. Hello, pay attention. And so throughout that, and later on, I did the messages sometimes, like the Sunday sermon. And obviously, that takes a lot of writing, a lot of planning, and all that. So then, when it all fell apart and I lost my career like virtually overnight, it was so devastating. I actually was fired in the church twice. The first time, kind of for being female. We had a pastor come in that did not think that women should be in a leadership role. And I was leading so much at that church that it was bound to cause problems. So, in that is a part of what's in the book. And it's a key part of my story is that, we gave 10 years of our life to this church and we got fired essentially. And he fired us. And then he turned around and told the congregation that we left. So the pastor outright lied, but what are you going to do about it? They're in charge, they're in control. And then I led another church for 5 more years after that. And then I was fired from that church when I got divorced. And at that point, I had nothing. And there had been so much devastation. I mean, as you'll hear, that was 8 churches and 6 different denominations from Los Angeles to North Carolina over the span of 23 years. That was all church leadership. And I got thrown out because of getting divorced. So it was so like, what do I do with my life now? My whole life was gone, like everything that I had done. And what felt so frustrating about it is that at the very beginning, remember, I had given up. I was on this great career path and I gave it up to follow the church, to work for these people. And then after giving that all up, 23 years later, after building my career through that, because it is a career. People don't want to admit it, but it is. It just all got yanked out from under me. So I had to sit back and just kind of say, "Oh, okay, now what? Now what do I do? Okay, I finally got out of my marriage, but I'm sitting there alone, but I don't have anything. But in a certain way, I kind of had everything. And I don't want to say this was not a vengeful act, but somehow I had to get the catharsis of like, I have to make this into something. I'm looking at like it would be like looking at a huge building that just got demolished and saying, okay, I'm looking at rubble. What can I make out of the rubble? And that's what this book came out of is what do I do with a life that's just been absolutely destroyed? I have nothing left. I have no husband. I have no house. I have no money because, and this is where I learned the importance of money is because in the church, they're always like, oh, God will take care of you. God will take care of you. You know what? Money's important. And when they tell you that it's not, they are absolutely dead ass wrong. So this was really the product of that. And what happened is I had just been collecting note cards and stories, and I was like, oh, I got to write a book about this. I want to tell my side of the story. Because remember, I was thrown out of the church very publicly. And I was like this guy's wife, and everybody knew him, and he was the pastor, and I was a bad girl because I left him. I never had the chance to tell my side of the story and tell the other side of the things that I saw happen in the church that they just kind of shoved under the carpet. And I never had my chance to tell my side of the story, the guys that date you and take advantage of you and don't allow you any voice in a relationship. And so this was me, you know, a therapist said many years ago that I remember I'll never forgot. She said, you have to be able to say ouch. And in a lot of ways, this book is me saying, ouch, me saying, this is what you did. It hurt. It was wrong. So there is that, but it's also just really a pretty freaking funny book. There's a lot of hilarious moments in it.
It is.
So
You have a really great sense of humor.
So let me ask Monica, first of all, I love the perspective of here's the rubble laying at my feet. What can I make out of it? And Liz and I talk a lot together and with clients and on our podcast about perspective being what drives so much of what we do and kind of helps us to rise above in a way. And I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with you, obviously off camera. And you mentioned in those conversations and even early on in this discussion, you had all of these interests and all of these different hobbies and things that really fascinated you that you wanted to learn about when you were young and as you grew.
Mhm.
And then reading excerpts from your book, which I've read bits and pieces, and I'm really excited to read the full thing now that it's out there and available. And we will link to that
Yay.
later on so everybody knows where to get it. But when you were in the church and you were working as a leader in the church, did you have those moments? It seemed like in what I've read, you've had moments where you did feel pretty restricted. You weren't able to maybe explore those other interests or parts of yourself or aspects of skill sets that you knew you had that you just couldn't make use of. So having this shift from moving out of the church and as devastating as it was, like you said, your career as you know it is done and you have a pile of rubble at your feet, no home, no money, you're starting fresh out of your marriage. Did you have a little glimmer of hope or almost like that sense of relief in terms of now I get to really reinvent myself. Maybe now I can tap into other aspects that I haven't been able to in so long. Was there a part of you, as terrifying as it was, that felt a sense of freedom and like you could breathe for the first time? And tell us a little bit about what that actual shift felt like for you.
Definitely. That was the part that made it all worth it because the minute that I came home, I mean, there's a lot of I will never forgets here. There is a pinnacle in the book where I had held on, and I was getting very depressed. And I was like almost suicidal. I had gotten in a really, really bad place towards the end of my marriage. And then there was one key thing that happened, and all of a sudden I'm like, and it was devastating, but it allowed me to finally, that was the day that I was able to drive home and tell my husband, it's over, it's done. I am exiting the bedroom. I'm going to be living in the basement until I find a place to live. And it's that was like immediately I felt a sense of freedom. I mean, I knew that it was going to be horrible in front of me, but this was like being in prison and the door is open. and you walk out the door, and I think that a lot of times for years I think the door was open, but I just kept on not taking the door. And I think sometimes we do that. We just sit in our own prisons of our own making, and never actually walk out a door that, I mean, I could have done it a long time ago. I could have done it right away, but I didn't. I stayed for 23 years. And then when I was finally brave enough to do it, and like I said, there's a really kind of crazy thing that happened that preceded that. And that's pretty personal. It's in the book, but that's why I'm not saying exactly what it is. But I was finally to the point where I came home and said, it's over. But I will tell you, the minute you actually finally say those words and actually finally do the thing, it is amazing, because you may have nothing to go to, but you are free. You are free. And so I remember the first night going into, when I first moved out, there was a friend that was nice enough to let me stay. She kept her cottage open for an extra month. And like I'm going up to the cottage. It's October. It's cold outside. I have my daughter with me. My daughter was actually excited. Go figure. Anyway, so we and I unlock the door and go in here, and I'm like, wow, this is the beginning. And I remember the second place that I actually lived at in three different places in what I call tiny town before I left and moved to what I call in the book big suburb, which is where I am today. But in that little area, I lived in three different places. And I remember going outside on this balcony and just thinking, man, I could go, because it really is true. Like, if you lose everything, then you have no restraints. So I had no man telling me what to do or what I couldn't do or what we couldn't afford or anything like that. I had no church telling me, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you better not do that, or don't you think that's a little risky? All of that was gone. So I would sit there and go, man, I could go to Dubai. I could go to Florida. I could go anywhere. And it just was, I mean, it's a little bit of a crazy fantasy, but it's really true that anything was open to me at that point.
I'm going to interject just a quick side note. You spoke of Florida and you did take a trip
Yes.
on your own. And me and her other sister, who are really close with her, were like, what in the heck is she doing? Like, we were nervous for her because she really
Oh,
had
I didn't know that when I went to Miami. Oh
right,
my
and
gosh,
she
that's too
kind of
funny.
spread her wings on her own. And so it was kind of cool. But you saw Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah,
And
I went to a Tony Robbins conference in Miami. But I mean, the bigger thing is really not the Tony Robbins.
no, but
It's the fact that I finally took a trip by myself. I planned like a big thing alone in a city I had never been to. It was something I had never done at that point.
I feel like that was definitely part of your journey and what we talk about, the journey of empowering yourself. Like, you
Oh,
took
absolutely.
personal responsibility and said, okay, what could I do to, improve my circumstances? And I know, I mean, those are not cheap either, so you were living paycheck to paycheck, and you saw the
I
value.
scraped it up, man.
Yeah, and really, did something totally for yourself that was totally empowering. That was one of the cool steps along the way for sure.
Well, I've been talking a lot about the church, but what preceded that trip, after I got divorced, it didn't take very long for me to get caught into kind of the La Brea tar pit of guys and dating. And man, that is a five-ring circus, let me tell you. So I jumped into, I mean, early on, I got a boyfriend almost right. I was trying not to date anybody. You know what? They tell you not to date anybody when you get divorced. I think it's a complete farce. And oh my God, there was this, I talk about it in the book, but there's this rule that they have in this church program called divorce care, which, okay, if it helps you, great, whatever works for you. But they have a rule where you're supposed to take off a year for every 5 years that you were married. In other words, if you were married for 20 years, you're supposed to take off 4 years, 1 year for every five, before you're ready for dating.
Oh my
And
God,
I will tell you right
that's
now that the thing
interesting.
that nothing prepares you for dating, there's no freaking
No.
way. In fact, I had done so little dating before I met my husband. That's how he was able to walk right in and say, oh, I want to date you. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to date you. This doesn't feel right. And so he was able to kind of coerce me. But if I had dated a bunch of guys before that, I would have known better. So I'm like, as soon as you're ready, go out there and do it. Because I mean, I knew people through the years who didn't date for 5 years after they got divorced, and then the first guy they went with flopped. So I it doesn't protect you. It isn't the magic talisman that will make you, oh, now I'm really going to meet the right guy because I waited long enough. And who comes up with these rules anyway? That's not written down, and it's not in the Ten Commandments. It's just
No.
it is not etched in stone. Some person sat there and said, "Well, I think they should take off a year for every 5 years. Sounds good. Let's put it in print."
Make
And
that
now
a
they
rule.
teach it all over the country.
Yeah.
Yes, they made it into a rule. And
I
so
will say,
anyway, I was very blind.
yeah, I'm gonna
What?
jump on the. I'll be the devil's advocate, maybe, just because of the business that we're in.
Yeah, go for it.
So the financial planning world, anytime you have some large life-changing event, I'm not sure, I mean, they don't go into like when you should date by any means, but they do talk about large changes to your life, holding off a little while. And it's usually, I think their guideline is around 18 months. And we see it a lot with widows and divorcees, where particularly with widows, there is this cloud, this haze that they're just not, you're just not maybe thinking straight. So, like, I think that's where I've never heard the year per 5 years of marriage, but I definitely think there
Well, I
is.
mean, if you're 60 years old and you've been married for 30 years, you're signing up for 6 years, you're going to be 66 by the time you
Right.
start
I
dating.
mean, but there is something
No.
like jumping into things, isn't there? I mean, maybe you just go for it, and which I know you kind of did. Um,
I think
so,
I think the
I
most
didn't, though.
important
That's the
thing.
thing, because you know who the first guy I dated was. And I wound up having a 3.5 year relationship with a guy who was not a good guy to be with.
Aaron,
I was with him for 3.5 years, but I was trying to avoid dating. And you know what? You're going to meet people anyway. You meet people no matter what you do. And it's like you might as well at least be picky about it
Yeah.
and be prepared. Be at
I,
least prepared, because you may meet people and not even know.
I was just gonna say, I think the most important thing is, I mean, because there is no hard and fast rule, whether it's dating or financial decisions or whatever it is, I think we tend to put like parameters out there as guidelines when we don't know. But no matter what it is that you're making decisions on, I think that there is a very dramatic change in like reasoning and decision making that happens when you go from, whether it's in a relationship and you go through a divorce, or you lose your spouse and become a widow or a widower, whatever it is, when you're making that change. And honestly, Liz and I talk about this, even if when you're making big career changes, there is a shift from how you are making those decisions. When you're in a relationship specifically, you're making decisions: what's best for us
Hmm.
as a couple, what's best for our future. And then there is a period of time, and for everybody, you're right, Monica, it is different. And so that's why we put these like parameters in place to kind of help and guide. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. It's different for everybody. The most important thing is you have to take a step back. I believe you have to take a step back and kind of realign and reassess who you are and what your,
Hmm.
talk about this a lot, Liz, with our clients, what your core values are as an individual. And so you can, go out and test the waters. You can try and make some financial decisions and test some things out, but do it in bite-sized pieces, take baby steps towards it. But then along the way, make sure that you're doing the work to really figure out what's important to you, what matters, what are your core values, so that when you do make those bigger leaps and take those bigger steps, no matter what avenue you're taking them in, new relationships or career changes or big financial decisions, you're doing it because it's aligned with what you believe in and your value system, and not whatever value system was created in that former life of yours. So there's that shift that needs to happen. And so different people are going to have different, I mean, with money, we talk about risk tolerance and how much risk you're comfortable taking. And some people, Monica, like it sounds like you were like, okay, I'm ready to take some risks. Let's try some things. Some people are
Well,
like,
you're actually setting up the last point of my book perfectly. So keep going.
oh, great. but everybody has their own, level of comfort with that, and that's okay. But make sure that you're taking the time, I think, to really, understand what's important to you and find yourself again, no matter what that next step is. So that's what I think we all try to encourage as we're going through that, and what you
Yes.
have to live and figure out on your own.
Right.
Well, and to your point, although I don't think there should be like a hard and fast rule about it, where I wind up at the end of that entire section of the book is okay, I'm spent all this time in the church and lose it. And then I spend all this time dating, 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 with all these guys. And it made for a lot of hilarious stories. So anyway, that after all these awful dating experiences, there was one guy who really, really broke my heart and is a really dramatic story. He walked out, and that's when I hit rock bottom in the dating world,
Mm.
essentially. And I had to sit there and say exactly what you were talking about. And this is why I said you so perfectly set up the last part of the book, because the part three is where everything had fallen through, and including all these guys. And I had to finally do the difficult work of getting to know who I was, because I just jumped straight into dating. And you're right, I hadn't gotten to know myself first.
Mhm.
And then that's when I finally did all the work to get back who Monica is. And that's where I created Monica Masters. And that's when I went to Miami by myself. And it wasn't for dating anymore. And I didn't want to meet a guy anymore. This was the end of the dudes section. I call these guys dudes because that to me is the term for a guy who just doesn't have all that much value, but you're adding him in your life to fill a hole,
Yeah.
to fill a hole that you need to fill with finding your purpose, with, you know, getting the things that make you whole, that somebody else cannot provide that for you. And it's funny because I see relationships, I see lifetime relationships where people are still in that place where they rely on that other person to fill that spot and they still don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
So if there was one point that I was trying to get across in there, it's who are you and who is trying to hijack your life? And that's why there's a wheelbarrow on the front cover, because when you give your life to another person or another entity or the church or whatever shouldn't take, I mean, it's fine to belong to a church. It's fine. Give your time, do things for the church, but it took over Monica until I was just what they wanted me to be. I was always who the pastor wanted me to be, and I would make anything happen for them. And I was just in such an enabling relationship with the church. I wouldn't say no to anything. And then later, that's what happened with the guys. I couldn't say no to them. And so I would climb in the wheelbarrow and they'd haul me off wherever they wanted, or the pastor would haul me off to whatever he wanted me to do. And so that's why I kind of make the illustration of get out of the wheelbarrow and get a rocket and start rocketing in on what you want, set your direction, and find out exactly what it is you want. And don't let people take it away from you. And it invariably will happen. The funny thing is, I thought it was kind of a one time thing where I'm like, oh, I got my life back. I went to Miami, I fixed it. I went to Tony Robbins, I did all this stuff. And it's not, it's a daily battle. It's like being in a 12-step program. Like every day, you have to be like, okay, today I will not give my life away to somebody. Today, I will not let somebody take away my direction.
Yep.
Today, I will not let that guy convince me to do something I don't want to do. You know, whatever it is, it's a daily commitment.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was kind of a lot.
No, that was great. And I agree. We talk about this a lot, don't we, Liz, as far as really understanding what your purpose is and setting that direction. And I think we work a lot with people who are nurturers and caretakers. And
Yes.
Liz and I are very much people pleasers, and Monica, it sounds like part of that. Like, it has,
I need like a people pleaser support group.
yeah, it's like it's gotten this negative, it's gotten this horrible connotation to it over the years, and it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be, but you're right, we do have to learn how to, you know, remind ourselves it's a daily practice like anything. And the more we give away and the more exhausted we become, the harder it is to, I think, set our path back in the direction that we know is right for us so that we can do
Completely.
better for ourselves and do better for other people. But the more and more that we continue to give and do those things, the quicker and easier it is for us to, I think, be pulled away from our path and our purpose. And so it is just constant taking that time to evaluate and make sure that we are aligning ourselves with what we know we need to do so that we can really follow our purpose. And then we do wind
Right.
up giving back more and doing more and feeling more fulfilled with what we're doing.
Absolutely.
There's a book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, and it's really the initial part of it is realizing, especially caregivers, what givers, the positives of being a giver. And, some of the most generous people, that's, all of these charitable intents and all of these donations and all of that is phenomenal. But then you keep reading the book, and I don't know, chapter 7 or whatever, but it's like into the book where all of a sudden it's like, okay, but do you cross over into the category of being a doormat? And that was such an eye opener for me because people would tell me, "Oh, you're too nice." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" I like being nice.
That.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's giving so much that you're giving up part of yourself up.
Yeah, I try not to sneeze in the middle of your great point.
No, that's okay. But so yeah, that kind of changed my direction a little bit after I read that book because it really did guide me. And then the other thing too, and I know, we've all had experience with this, which I'm definitely get on my soapbox about this, about other women who can be our own worst enemies. We preach about, the women's empowerment and women this and women that. But there are so many women out there that I experienced, that were just so happy to squash me on their quest to get ahead. And whether it's men or women, honestly, we should be lifting others up as we're building ourselves up. So there's no reason we can't do that.
Mm,
So, just a side note.
agreed. Big, big fan of that. So I want to ask you, Monica, making that change and just rediscovering who you are or discovering who you are then at that stage in life. What did you do or how did you work through any feelings of fear or intimidation? Because making that change from what sounds like a very restrictive way of life in the church and then going through the process of and re-entering the dating pool and then taking the step back again, I'm sure there were a lot of maybe rules that you carried with you along the way that made you feel like you said there's things that you shouldn't be doing, there were rules that you should be following that you weren't. So how did you kind of reconcile those feelings to then break through them and move forward and kind of empower yourself in those next stages?
Well, I suffer with crippling imposter syndrome to the point that I don't even know what I'm doing on this podcast, having written a book. So I, every single thing that I do every day, I feel completely inadequate to do. And I mean, Liz can tell you that. Every time she comes over, I'm like, my house is a disaster. You just can't, just don't look at my house. And she'll be like, it's not even that bad. What are you worried about? But you carry that with you. And
Yeah.
all I don't think it ever goes away. You have to just learn to do it anyway. And that's my advice with that. I have done stuff. I have written while I'm crying and feel completely I have oh, if I could, I'm a crier, and if I could only express to you the times that I have been ready to go on stage and been crying or been hysterical earlier in the well, now I sound like I'm crazy, but but seriously, there I don't have it together. So when somebody sees me singing on stage, I don't feel like I can do that. I'm just doing it anyway. So
I love
you
that.
have to get yourself out there. And every time I don't care. And then sometimes you do something and you look back and you're like, ah, that was pretty good. And then that is the closest to confidence that I get.
Yeah.
And then it goes away the next day and you have to dig it out all over again.
I actually
So
really
I
like
just
that line. I think we need to create like hashtag just do it anyway.
Anyway, yes.
do it if you're crying. Do it if you're depressed. Do it if you can't get out of bed. Drag your computer into the bed
Yeah.
and do it there. Do it if you have to bribe yourself with chocolate or garbage TV or an hour of free scrolling on YouTube. Just whatever it takes to get you to do that thing, do it. And I have bribed myself. I feel like I drag myself kicking and screaming to do every little inch of the way along the road to success. Anything that I've ever done, I have dragged myself along. And the other thing that I will say, I mean, it's in my book anyway, because like I said, there's a lot in there about getting your life back, about surviving divorce and figuring out how to get over that, about surviving church abuse, about surviving the dating world and learning how to identify a good guy from a complete dipshit. There's a lot in there about that. But I will tell you that one of the key things is, and what helped once I got away from the guys and away from the pastors, is you really do have to get away from people who are going to tell you what to be or who aren't going to believe in you and your dreams. And there's a really fine line there, because you can have your dreams and they can come along. Because we were saying, this is kind of the mansplaining thing where they'll come in and say, and a woman can do this to you too, but they'll come in and say, oh, that's a good idea, but you know what you really should do? But you know what, you really need to take this back and workshop it. You need to take this back and do this. And even today I had somebody telling me, well, you're not ready to do that yet. You should cancel that and reschedule it at a later date. And I'm like, no, because I'm listening to me above these other people. So you have to learn to listen to yourself above all.
Yeah.
But the other thing, which you just reminded me of, like yesterday, I think, Liz, I think I got that quote directly from Liz. Anyway, but the other thing is, you really have to identify the people around you who are not supportive to your dreams. People aren't always happy to hear that you don't want to take their directions any longer. But you have to get rid of the people in your life. I mean, I have gotten rid of every friend or acquaintance, and sometimes they don't even know that I'm not spending time with them anymore. You don't have to make it that obvious, but you just
Take a
don't
step.
make room in your life for naysayers. You don't need them. I mean, you need the constructive critique people who tell you that your glasses are on funky or whatever, or spinach in your teeth. But you don't need the people who are going to pick at your dreams and say, are you sure you should really do that?
Yeah.
I don't really see you that way. I mean, I remember my ex-husband told me that I would never be a jazz singer.
Look at you now.
Yeah,
That,
I had a whole jazz career ever since I was like
my
25.
favorite genre that you sing, actually. So,
Actually, I think my favorite now is rock.
no.
I
Well,
like rock,
I know you do, but I
but
prefer
it kind of changed. But I like jazz too. I don't know. I like it all.
that. Yeah. So I don't know if I even need to ask this. How are you disrupting the status quo?
Now, let me consult my little sheet here.
Every way, shape, and form.
Right. Besides every way, I love
It really, I really do tend to be, I mean, and you know that I've been contrarian since the day I was born. I mean, when we were in school and everybody's wearing the same thing, do you remember that you had like the alligator shirts, the eyes on shirts? And I got that. I somehow found this place that made dead alligator shirts where it's laying on its back with an X for the eyes like this. So I got that and I was all proud of it. And she's like, Monica, that's ridiculous. And she's probably right. But I'm just saying that I kind of always tended to be a little bit of a trend bucker and a little bit more of a nonconformist. And that, so I don't have a problem. I usually cause more trouble than I prevent.
I would say that. No,
So,
but actually it's a lesson too, earlier on. I mean, I would still say the easier path is to follow, you know, either
yes.
create the trend and have everybody follow you, or follow the trend. That's definitely easier. It doesn't necessarily create more happiness in your life though, if you're not being true to what you like. I mean, I've gotten flack, especially in the financial planning world. I feel guilty because I'm on the spending side. I'm not always on the investing and saving side. So I feel like at first, until I really grasped that the fact that I am a spender and I've had credit card debt, that I understand what people are going through, probably more than most. And, trying to strike that balance. But that difference though between, that trend follower and then being true to what's you know, But I
Hmm.
also feel like in many ways today, if you don't want to follow the trend, you're almost getting stuck following the opposite, which might still not be your thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, being extreme this way, not so great, maybe. Being extreme this way, not so great either. So, what is your own true path? And that might,
Right.
when I talk to people and people who know me, I'm willing to get into it with, the left and the right. I find that most people, when you talk about things and what's important to them, it's very similar. So
Right.
we all have these little, issues and little things that really are we're passionate about, and that's awesome. But it's really difficult sometimes when the people that you respect are, kind of going off on a tangent that you don't necessarily agree with. You've opened up, this kind of a really interesting journey that you've been on of never feeling that, oh my God, I totally nailed it, or I'm totally doing the right thing. That Aaron and I kind of deal with this on a weekly or if not daily basis that we're like, are we doing the right thing? Yep.
Are we on the right track?
Keep doing it, so we most of the time we're pretty confident in our views, and yet if we start thinking too big, then we're like, oh my God, is this too big, is this too much? But then we're like, wait a second, oh, you know other people do this all the time, every day. And whether it's the do it anyway or fake it till you make it or whatever it is, I think there are some different and bold strategies to just keep living your dream or trying.
Any, yeah, any person that you see, any celebrity, any billionaire, any person that has some amazing enterprise, they're a human being just like you. You're like, they don't have some sort of special, they're not a god. We're all similar. They just decided to do something. So why
They
not
just did
decide
it
to do
anyway.
something?
I will say, I think that
What?
I said they just did it anyway. Like we said, just do it
Yeah,
anyway.
there you go. They just did it anyway.
I think your story too, honestly, is a very good lesson to everyone in that you mentioned even since you were young, you always were kind of a contrarian and you always did the opposite. And so I think a lot of people would assume someone who it's just natural for them to not follow the status quo would easily be able to know who they are and follow that path and stay aligned with it.
True.
But still, even knowing that you have that in you, it was still just as easy for you to be swept up into something that, like you said, didn't
You should have seen me in
fit
the church.
anyway. So, lesson to everybody, make sure that you take the time to do the work to understand who you are and what's important to you because those decisions make a difference along your entire path in life. So, just kind of interesting.
You're right though, because I started out like sassy and snarky and wearing all this black and being kind of a punk. And then I get into the church and all of a sudden I'm like, folding my hands in my lap and wearing floor length skirts. The first church I was in, you couldn't wear pants, you couldn't wear makeup, you couldn't cut your hair, not even a trim, you couldn't color your hair, you couldn't wear jewelry. I mean, you couldn't watch TV. It was just it was extremely strict. And so I'm saying I mean, I was unrecognizable. I got stripped down to nothing. Like there's no Monica left in there. And the funny thing about this is that Liz was there to see it. She told me at one point, she's like, I think you're in a cult. And I'm like, oh, you're going to hell. And she wasn't. And I wasn't a cult.
Goodness.
Oh, so yeah, it did. It did. The church absolutely gutted me, and that's why I said. But it's not God; it's the church. It's the it's the people that find a way to get control of your life, and there will always be people that will control you if they can find a way to do it, because that's how they get fed and that's how they get their power, and you have to watch out for that. And unfortunately, narcissists radar in. They can find. They're like, oh, there she is, and then they will gut you. They will take everything that you offer them and then some.
Yeah.
And it's what was I going to say when you said
Disrupting the
I don't know. Oh, and you were saying disrupting the status quo. I did want to address what women are taught in the church, because a lot of my experiences in the world, but a lot of it was in these churches. And there tends to be this belief. Now, being a wife and a mother is a great thing. And yes, we need to repopulate. So go do your job, women. But but not really, because it's like, if you're taught, I remember one of the most bitter women that I've ever known, and she was in her 50s, and she was raised in the Christian church and taught that you have to pray for your husband and pray for your children, because that's your future. You're going to be a wife, you're going to be a mother. And so she put all her eggs in that basket. Well, she never met the guy, and she never had the children.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's it. That's all they taught that there was to her. So she was left empty and bitter at 50 and didn't really have anything to rely on. So I know that we as women are more than that. Yes, you can be a wife. Yes, you can be a mother. Yes, you have more to you than just that.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important for us to, teach our daughters that, to especially as women, because men aren't taught that part of it. That is one part of my book that I will say is exclusive to women, is that men are not taught, well, no, you don't have to figure out who you are, because you're already going to, get married to somebody someday. No guy gives up his life for a marriage, or at least it's very uncommon. Maybe they do. I don't know. Let me know. I don't think there's very many. I think it's far more often the case, especially in religious circles, where women give up all that they are. And it's fine to, be a stay-at-home mom and all that, but there's more to you than that.
Mhm.
And I want to see the depression end for women who all of a sudden have their kids move out, maybe their marriage falls apart, or in your case, what you've seen, they lose their husband unexpectedly, and all of a sudden they have nothing, because they never figured out who they are by themselves. And you need to be a whole person no matter who you are, and no matter how many children you have. You can have 20 children, God forbid, you can have 20 children and still have a you that you know who you are.
Yeah.
But I think that just kind of gets steamrolled under the roles of wife and mother. Those are roles. That's not the completion of who you are, though. So that is one thing that I'm definitely bucking, is that being taught in the church. I think that any woman is more than just a wife or a mother. That is not their everything.
Well said. I love it. Oh,
And it's so funny, because they always say, "Oh, women, wives, mothers." When did, like I said, when do they ever teach, like, "Oh, as a man, you're just going to be a husband"? They never say that.
right.
We're the only ones who get saddled with that.
Well, I do want to give you the opportunity to read a little portion of your book. So if you have that available, we
And I'm going to share my screen so I can share the cover while you're reading your excerpt.
would be
So
great.
everybody can see what to keep an eye out for.
Excellent.
This is Monica's book. Can be found on Amazon right now. You can download it to your Kindle, buy it to your Kindle, and then are you going to have hard copies and paperback copies and everything
Yes.
available soon? Okay.
Yeah, hard copies will be in about the next month. And I mean, you can go on monicamasters.com, and also plugging my music. If you go on Facebook, I am Atomic Monica on Facebook. That's
Okay.
Atomic Monica, Atomi. You know how to spell atomic.
Yeah.
Atomic Monica. Anyway, that's on Facebook. And then you'll know where I'm playing, because I'm always playing somewhere. So anyway, here is a little excerpt. I'm just going to read the prologue, because I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff in the dating area. But okay, prologue. By now, I toss the virtual clothing into my shopping cart of sin. I have never owned a corset top before, but I simply must have it. A beauty, a splendor, a black satin jacquard wonder clasped with gold swing hooks that make me look like I just arrived on the steampunk train. I have a rock gig, and I will make sure they remember this night. I have been traipsing all over my previous life, broken halo toppling from my head, and I am deep into seeing how much pleather I can stuff in my cart before noon. My phone buzzes. Hey, stranger. Kink, dude. I barely remember him. What's he doing muddling my inbox? I toss my phone back on the couch, message ignored and unanswered. I continue my shopping spree. I find crazy stiletto boots with a 2-inch platform and chains and flames and a jeweled skull on the heel. Unsure if I can even walk in them, and click, here they come. Why not? I am celebrating. I smirk to myself at the irony of the physical chains on my clothing having replaced the prison in which I was once trapped. I will tell my story, and I will begin with a piece of forbidden clothing. Hint, it's not a corset top. So that's the prologue.
I love it. You're
The
such a great
forbidden,
and you do such a great job with all your descriptive terms. It really like draws you in and makes you feel like you're there, you're watching it happen.
ah,
It really
cool.
helps the reader like get inside your head. It's amazing. You're very talented.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and the forbidden piece of clothing is so funny, but the forbidden piece of clothing in that first chapter is a freaking split skirt. I had
Oh,
this pastor ranting at me at a southern accent. We were down in Champaign, Illinois, which somehow is over the Mason-Dixon line. And he's like, Sister Monica, you can't wear a split skirt. Two-legged garments are of the devil. And he was
oh my
telling me,
God.
like, essentially that I had to wear a skirt. I could not wear culottes. We're too
Oh wow.
sexy.
Oh my goodness.
So,
So
yep, I went from no culottes to
I love it.
corset tops. Yeah, I have a very interesting wardrobe.
That's good. Sounds like it was time.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was it
where
was time.
I think when the readers and the watchers of our podcast, the listeners of our podcast get a hold of this, I think just speaking with you, I think has given the listeners an understanding of your humor and your talent in writing. I think it's really going to be a wonderful book. If not, it should be for certain. You should have agents knocking on your door, in my opinion. So hopefully people will share this.
I hope so. I do actually. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I do have a follow-up book actually. I've always been settled on the term glow, but it's actually a companion book about reclaiming your life. And it goes kind of it's I what was my other thing? I don't know. There Oh yeah, I was thinking of calling it Rockets Over Wheelbarrows. And because there's conceptual things that happen in that book, and I want to go into more detail about it. I mean, for instance, one of the chapters in that one is going to be start every day like you're 21. And I don't mean like driving faster. Yeah, you're like, what?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is people tend to think that things are unavailable to them just because they're a certain age. Well, you can be 70 and still have 20 years left,
Yeah.
and you act like you have 2 days.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you don't know that you're going to die tomorrow. Go back to school. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
granted, you're maybe not going to do some things that you were physically able to do, but hey, I started playing guitar when I was 37. I started water skiing when I was 40. I published my first book at
Wow.
55. Come on. I
That's
mean,
amazing.
just so like if you mentally get past that, because even a 21-year-old doesn't know if they have next week. They
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
So why not just pretend you have, like, okay, let's say you're sitting there and I mean, even if you're 80, like, well, what would I do if I was 21? Well, I always wanted to paint. You can paint.
Mhm.
Go
Yeah.
get the shit and get it done. And that, but that's just like one chapter. So anyway, that's my teaser for the next book,
I love that. I
which
can't
is
wait
not
to
out
read
yet.
it. Yep.
No, it's
Thank you.
well, I think we're about to wrap up here. So I think this has been really excellent podcast. Thank you for attending, and we will get this posted as soon as we can. And I think it's going to be great. One last thing, you definitely the hashtag do it anyway seems like perfect, but do you live by any other guiding North Star or mission statement that you want to share?
I had my mission statement. This is a really good example of do it anyway, because I had my mission statement all tidied up like 3 years ago, and then it keeps like changing. So I will tell you one thing that I do almost every single day is I write down, I do have a journal and I'll write whatever BS is going on in my head in the minute on the right side, but on the left side, I always write the same thing. I, Monica Masters, am a best-selling author. I, Monica Masters, am the words change a little bit sometimes, but it's always something like a kick-ass, well-known virtuoso singer and musician. I, Monica Masters, make millions selling my books and media and blah blah blah. So, but you find out what that thing is because it's gonna be different for everybody. But I learned that years ago from a guy named Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. He wrote down every day, and he wrote it 15 times. I found that laborious, but 15 times in a row, I am a syndicated cartoonist. And he's like,
Oh my
and he's
gosh.
a very practical, intelligent guy. And he's like, okay, there may have been something that we don't totally understand at work here. And I think there may be something that we don't totally understand when you write something down and put it out into the universe or to God or pray over it or whatever you want to do. I think there's something bigger that happens because those things are slowly starting to come to me. And every time I make a stride in that direction, and like I said, I'll write those words even if I'm like in tears, upset, feel like I've lost anything, or just had a terrible gig. It doesn't matter. I still write down the same things every day. So that is one routine that I have that I think has helped. I don't have a lot of routines. I'm too ADHD to have a lot of routines. Anyway.
I think that's a great one though, and very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's definitely a great thing to leave everyone with, that reminder that no matter what you do, even if it's one little baby step, we encourage it wholeheartedly, and we want everyone to know that we support you in that. We're trying to do the same things right along with you, but every little step in that direction can make a big difference. And so thank you, Monica, for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your story. We will definitely make sure that we link out to your website and your book and make sure that we share information with everybody who listened and watched today. Thanks, Liz, for doing this right along with me, and we will keep taking those baby steps together. And thank you, everybody who tuned in to listen. We really appreciate your attention and your time, and we look forward to seeing you guys again on the next one. All right. Take care.
Hashtag do it anyway.
Hashtag do it anyway. Yep.
Woo! Get it away.
Investment advisory services are offered through Wealthy Empowerment Network, an investment advisor in the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Ohio. Kona Financial Planning and Infinity Wealth Company, LLC are doing business as or DBA names of Wealthy Empowerment Network, LLC. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing should be construed as personalized advice or recommendation of any kind. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. All expressions of opinion are subject to change without notice, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. We do not guarantee the accuracy of the information provided. There is no assurance that any investment, plan, or strategy will be successful. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Wealthy Empowerment Network is not affiliated with the guest featured in the podcast and does not endorse or recommend any services they provide.